My dear brothers and sisters in the Lord, my name is Brother Syro, and today I have a very special guest on to talk about a very particular topic, which is the pronunciation of the word Qadisha, Kandisha. Okay, well, this is why we're getting into the video. So let me just have Joel, my friend here, introduce himself, and then we'll go get straight into it. So go ahead,
Well,
Joel.
thank you, Brother Syro. I appreciate an opportunity. I'm happy to be here. Hello, everyone. I'm Joel. I am from the Kansas City mission here in the U.S., and I go to school at the University of Texas at Dallas. I'm finishing up my bachelor's, and we're going from there. Yeah, I grew up in India, and here we are.
All right, awesome. So just a little background before we get straight into what Joel has to say about this topic. So in the Syro Malabar Church, we have tried to restore back and try to be a little bit more regular with singing different Qurbana hymns in the Syriac language. And definitely it's a video that I have planned at some point to talk about why this is very important for us to restore this and have it be a relevant or prominent part in our liturgy to use Syriac. Uh, I've made a video earlier called Mass versus Qurbana, how it's important to have the word Qurbana used for when we describe what we do. So in that similar vein, like when we started using the Syriac hymns, there is a question raised with one particular hymn, which is the Trisagion hymn. Our ancestors or people have said, Kandisha, they have that particular sound. But then, especially when you talk with the Chaldeans, they pronounce it a different way. So, what seems to be correct? And I know in certain communities that I visited, I've heard it pronounced one way, I hear it pronounced another way. So, this is why I wanted to bring this just to our attention. So go ahead, Joel, and like what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think to start out, I want to put it out there. I mean, Syriac is essentially our mother tongue. Even before Malayalam became Malayalam, Syriac was something that was more commonly used, going back 2,000 years. And so it's our mother tongue. It's unique to us. Now, it's on the decline lately, but it's still unique to us. And that's what I want to put out there. And when you look at the word Qadisha, which the way we pronounce it, and like you said, Brother Syro, we have the Chaldeans who say Qadisha, or the Syriac Orthodox who go and say Qadisha. They're all unique. We all have our, I guess, orthographical rules of the language. But definitely Qadisha is what we use, and I believe it has historical significance.
Yeah, so
Uh,
let's get into those historical
yeah,
things that you've come across.
absolutely. So let's talk grammatically first, I guess orthographically. I'm not a scholar of the language at all. I'm just a nerd of this. I try not to be. Well, yeah. When you look at it, you see with the Kandisha or the Kadisha, the way um, the Chaldeans pronounce it, there is this idea of doubling. So now the Syriac Orthodox, the West Syriac folks, don't have this, and so they just pronounce it as Qadisho. And you see, there's only one dalis, the thing that makes the da sound. There's only one of it, but the the doubling is implied there, and we see it with the Chaldeans. We also see it with us, except we have an extra rule there, where we say when you double that particular letter, the dalis, we are adding an n sound. We're putting a noon in front of it. That's essentially implied. So even though the Chaldeans double it, they say Qadisha, we're doubling it too. We're saying Kandisha. If you look at another letter, say for the Zain, I think you have Gesa, and we double it just the way they double it. We have a much softer pronunciation, I'd say. So when you look back, at least historically, I know we've used it, right? You will look back at all the videos, say Father Joseph Parakil has on his amazing website that he put together. All the priests on there pronounce Kandisha, so we know it has at least 100 years
Hmm.
originality. Another place I remember encountering is in the songs of the Knanaya people. especially the song, the Matom in the Mea. In that, when they say Qadisha, and the song has quite the history.
Mm.
At the very least, I'm not well versed in the history of it, but definitely more than half a millennium, right? So they used Kandisha back then too. So there's that. Um, but when you also look back, this is something I heard from a certain priest, Father Thomas Koonammakkal, I believe. Brother Syro, what do you say? Is that his name? That is his name, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Well, this is one thing I heard him mention in one of his interviews with Paalikilachan. And what he brought about was, you see, in the Middle East, there's a community called the Mandaeans. They were not at all well known until a century or two ago in the Western world, and they use their language is also a language that stems from the Syriac Aramaic um, branches. And in their language, although the the script of the language is slightly different than what we use, their pronunciation in their language, they're known as the Mandadhaye, right? The Mandaean people. But when you write it, you would read it. If the Chaldeans had to read that in their Chaldean language, they read Madadhaye,
Mm.
but they pronounce it Mandadhaye, right? So there is that noon, and so clearly, I mean, when you look at that, and they were essentially like a closed community for ages. They claim to be now. I'm correct me if I'm wrong. I might be wrong here. They claim to be the followers of John the Baptist, and they're very focused on baptism. But and because they have been a close community and their language has been with them for so long, clearly there is some sort of ancient origin behind the Kandisha pronunciation of Kandisha. And
Mm.
I think it's ours. It's unique, and it deserves to be used. It's ours. At the end of the day, if anything, I want you guys to remember, it's ours.
Hmm. There was this point that when we had conversations before where you talked about like the Syriac language,
Yeah.
the Aramaic language, Suryani, like however you want to
Hmm.
refer to it, both the Chaldeans and us as Nasranis, we both have a equal claims to it. Like no one is correct more than another. I feel like you made a similar point to that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because we've had it almost to a certain, like we've had it within the same time frames that they've had it. Why? Because trade was a big thing, in the ancient
Hmm.
world, and we were a coastal land. We had a lot of trade with them, with everyone. And as Father Koonammakkal points out, trade was, I believe he said, to the time of Solomon. And so at least from that time, there were people who spoke the Suryani in our lands. Um, so we've had it as long, it was not something that was introduced in the 16th century or the 14th century or even the first century for that matter, because it had been spoken. And as Christianity developed in the land, because of our, uh, I guess, patrimony or our liturgical heritage, which we adopted from the Assyrians, right? And we adopt their liturgy, which was in Syriac, and we were well versed in it too, and hence we adopt it. So we do have as much heritage, although now it doesn't seem that way.
Hmm.
I remember someone mentioning the idea of no, there was a priest who had actually written an entire dictionary in the Suryani language.
Mm.
I think early 1900s, and this is a priest in India. This is one of our people who knew enough Suryani to write books. There are priests who knew enough Suryani to go actually teach Syriac at the Chaldean seminaries in Iraq. That's how much we knew it. In fact, there's a story which now I'm mentioning this the second time, I guess. It was a story that Father Emmanuel Thurley mentioned in one of his interviews with Father Palico of how when he was teaching there, he used, the pronunciations, Kandisha, whatnot. And all the seminarians back then made fun of him, saying, "Oh, you have bad Syriac." And
Mm,
apparently there was a deacon, I believe, from Alkosh or something or somewhere, who corrects the seminarian, saying, "Well, it's actually you're the ones who are in the wrong because Father Tilly is using the older pronunciation of it."
mm,
Because now I might not be right about this. I could be wrong, but there are these events from the 14th century, which essentially brings about a lot of changes with the Church of the East and with the Chaldeans. And someone was saying how these pronunciations could be pre 14th century pronunciations. But we've had for Syriac as long as we can look back. And I know we don't have too much to look back on, like more than like 500 years.
hmm.
But yeah, no, it's definitely, we have equal footing with them when it
Yeah.
comes to the language.
So I guess yeah, so when we pronounce it, just be like do Qadisha.
Yeah.
There's no reason to shy away from how we pronounce it. We've had Syriac for just as long, and if anything, our Syriac would have not been as like influenced by other areas because when you look at like the more Near East, Middle East, like where Syriac would have been pronounced or like used as a language, there's influences from all over the place. It's quite the crossroads. Whereas our part of India, it's harder to get to. I feel like there's going to be less influence on that. So it's just gonna keep repeating that way. It's not going to change because of other kind of influences. At least that's a theory, like maybe could be
I
viable.
absolutely, I absolutely agree. You know, we're definitely not as much influenced by Arabic as the Middle East is.
Hmm.
In fact, sometimes you can see that when the Chaldeans or the Syriac Orthodox speak their Syriac. Um, Now there was this recording by a certain person, I do not recall who. This is a Jew when the Jews from that area moved to Israel. This lady had, I believe, lady, I might be wrong, um, published this. It was on the internet, basically small snippets of people reading, I believe, from the Psalms or something. And she records it by the region. And when you go look at it, you'll notice how each region has its own way of pronouncing, right?
Hmm.
Some are much more harsh in their pronunciation, some more soft, especially when it comes to the dreaded letter in Syriac, the tau, which we have a very soft pronunciation. We tend to go sa,
Hmm.
whereas a lot of the Chaldeans maybe go with ta, right? Of
Hmm.
ta. And so you see that difference even within the region, right? So there's like inter-regional differences even there. And we have one that's been soft. Ours is a much softer pronunciation than theirs is for sure. And we have equal footing. Another thing I wanted to mention, I should have mentioned earlier, with the Mandadhaye, the Mandaeans and whatnot. Um, I think now I might be inferring this wrong. I feel like we have that doubling, and that's something the Chaldeans might have lost, right?
Hmm.
It's not necessarily something that's unique to us that we alone developed. They potentially would have had it too, because clearly the Mandaeans, who are at least 2,000 years old, still have that element of the Syriac language in their own language.
Hmm.
Um, so it is likely that the Chaldeans lost it. Now that's I'm up for correction, right? I
Yeah.
look to read more, change my mind. I'm happy to, but
Yeah.
definitely what we have is pretty old, ancient.
Hmm. Yeah. And one thing about like pronunciations is that could very easily change over time, like 100 years from now. Like these things are more dynamic, but I think like the argument that we're just making is, maybe there isn't a reason to shy away from how we pronounce it. And, like I think we have a good case here to say, hey, we could say Kandisha and we don't have to feel like we're pronouncing it wrong or we're kind of misinformed about how Syriac is said.
Absolutely. I completely agree. It's ours. There's that Malayalam word tanima, and I think you're right.
Hmm. Yeah, good stuff. I think it would be fun to close out this video. And, again, appreciate your time to make for this. And, we're just both students of Syriac and our tradition, and we're trying to
Right.
restore our Nasrani heritage and, be very proud that we have this. And it's something that the Lord has blessed our community
Mhm.
with, and we want to share that with the world. So just hopefully this, sparks some conversation and discussion about it. That's always what this channel is meant for. So let's close out in singing Kandisha, and
Yeah,
then we'll
absolutely.
end the call that way. I don't know if we want to
Sounds
do the
good.
whole thing, but
Let's just sing it one. Oh, actually, up to you.
we could do the just the Kandisha part.
Yeah,
Yeah,
perfect,
we'll end it
perfect.
that way.
All right.
Kandisha
Kandisha
Allah,
Allah, Kandisha
Kandisha
Hail
Aisana,
Sana, Kandisha
Kandisha Lama
Lamayusa, Esra
Yasram
Alim.
All right. Well, thank you again, Joel. We'll see how that song turns out in in the video.
Oh
Sometimes it's
yeah,
better
no,
when one person sings, but we'll
there's
see how it.
definitely that lag between two people. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
could,
I
yeah,
was
no.
when we sang it, I'm like, ooh, I should have thought that through more, but it's
Well, we'll
okay.
find out. Yeah. If
Yeah,
not, we'll just overlay it with some like music from somebody else. We have our own recording at this point,
we do. That's a
Yeah,
good shout out for our video, our recordings and stuff that we made.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well,
Well, good
thank you for
stuff.
having me on here, man.
Yeah.
I would love to. I'm glad I could be here, answer some questions. These are things I read before going to sleep, so we'll find out.
Yeah. Well, praise be to Jesus Christ.
Yes. Now and forever.
All
Amen.
right. This is Brother Syro signing out.